On Earth, it's time for our newspaper review, and we'll take a look at the stories making headlines around the world.
Okay, well, let's start with the International New York Times, and you know who he is on the front page, former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi. And this article, of course, is about the fact that he was expelled from Parliament in Italy, with the paper calling it the end of an era.
In the Financial Times, the European Central Bank has warned of the threats posed by scaling back U.S. monetary stimulus. It's calling on policymakers to do more to prepare for the inevitable.
In Germany's Frankfurter Allgemeine, Angela Merkel's new coalition government hits the front page. No surprise there. The German Chancellor finally formed a government with the Social Democrats 2 months after winning elections.
The China Daily reports that China has been calm in the face of U.S. B-52 bombers flying over its newly declared airspace, which falls over disputed islands in the East China Sea. The paper notes China plans to set up another air defense zone.
The UK's Times newspaper says British Prime Minister David Cameron has performed a U-turn on plain packaging for cigarettes and decided to support the idea.
And the Moscow Times, check out this for an advert. It calls it shameful, the giant Louis Vuitton suitcase display, which the company set up in Red Square. The Kremlin suggested the display be dismantled, which it's going to be. No surprise there. Joining us to take a look at the paper is Tom Stevenson, Investment Director with Fidelity Worldwide Investment. Welcome.
Morning,
Hello.
Tom.
Hello.
International New York Times. How many times have we written the political obituary of Silvio Berlusconi? Are you one who's prepared to draw the line under his career?
Well, he's a great survivor, isn't he? It does look as though his luck is beginning to run out, though. I mean, the significance of this is not so much that he's been expelled from the Senate, but the fact that he now loses his immunity against prosecution. So I think that his troubles are probably actually just beginning now. So I think this story will roll on for a while yet.
Well, obviously it's a fascinating political story, but surely the focus again will come back to the state of the Italian economy and the serious issues that it faces.
Yes, I mean, interesting that the markets have been pretty relaxed actually while this has been going on in the last day or so. So I think this is beginning to be priced in. Really, I think this is no longer such a big issue.
So. Well, we'll keep an eye, because as you say never, certainly as far as he's concerned. Now, Financial Times. Tom, it'd be really interesting to get your take on this article. The European Central Bank sounds tapering alarm, and the article talks about the ECB, but it also talks about the Bank of England, which will have its financial stability report out today, which is expected to discuss the fact or the impact that the move of the Fed starting to draw back its stimulus will have on the outside world.
Yes, I mean, I think, there are no surprises here. We've known for 6 months or so that tapering is coming at some point. I think it may actually be a bit further away than we think. I think it may be next March rather than December, people are talking about. But the cycle has turned, and it's not just in the US where the cycle has turned. The cycle has turned in the UK as well. Probably not in Europe, actually, which is still very much in loosening mode. And I think will continue to be in loosening mode. But certainly on both sides of the Atlantic, in the US and the UK, we are moving in that direction.
But just explain why the ECB feels it had to warn about the threat of the loosening of monetary policy would have on the economies in Europe, for example. Why would the ECB say that?
Well, I mean, as yields rise, I mean, we don't know where all the skeletons lie. I mean, there are still problems, and these have kind of been glossed over in the last 18 months or so, really, since Mario Draghi said he'd do what he had to do to defend the euro. But the Eurozone crisis is not over, and as rates rise, I think that it will become evident where the problems may lie.
And Tom, I know the emphasis is on Europe, and at least in this story in the paper, but tapering off is also a huge concern for a number of emerging economies as well, for India, for Brazil, for Turkey, who saw an influx of American money, and that could change.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And the money which left American shores in search of higher yields and better returns is going to start coming back, and in fact has started coming back as people see the prospect of better returns in the US with maybe less risk. So it's not good news for emerging markets at all.
Right, let's have a look now at the German press, and of course they are discussing in great detail today the deal brokered after 17 hours of negotiations between Angela Merkel and some of her opponents. So this new coalition government is now being formed. Give us your take.
Yes, well, it's not just 17 hours of negotiations. I mean, this has been going on for a couple of months now. So there's obviously been some pretty tough fighting behind the scenes. I think that the markets were pretty relaxed about it. German shares rose pretty strongly yesterday. I think it's probably quite a good deal. I think there's a bit on both sides. I think the Social Democrats have got something in terms of the national minimum wage, but it has quite a conservative feel, this coalition. No new taxes, no new debts.
Also, as well, when you talk about a coalition in Germany, there's a real sense of security about that, whereas if you talk about a coalition government, say, in Italy or other countries, you kind of think, oh my goodness, it could collapse any moment. But actually in Germany, they're very used to negotiating and working with their opponents, aren't they?
And indeed, not just in the political sphere, but in the business sphere as well. That kind of cooperation between managements and unions. It is a kind of German way, isn't it?
Let's move on to the China Daily, and now a big international news story this week has been the U.S. decision to challenge China's air zone over the East China Sea. The ball is firmly back in China's courts. The China Daily says they're responding calmly, but could this get a bit more bellicose, do you think?
It's a great headline, isn't it? China calm in the face of something which they started.
State-sponsored newspaper we
Well, absolutely. I mean, it is worrying, though. I mean, China is clearly flexing its muscles in the region. I think the interesting thing is I think they've picked quite a sensible fight here, because they're really testing the US's resolve to stand by Japan, because is the US really going to go to war over a few barren rocks on the other side of the Pacific? It's quite an interesting test. I think quite a clever move by the Chinese to push it on this particular issue.
On to the Times. Cigarettes in plain packs after a Cameron U-turn. UK politics rally, and the paper suggesting a turnaround at number 10 over the issue of cigarette packaging.
Yes, I mean, it does feel a little bit like a turnaround. I mean, Linton Crosby, David Cameron's advisor, obviously has a lobbying interest to some cigarette firms, so there's a bit of a conflict of interest going on there. I think what's interesting about this story, though, is the way in which the Conservatives are moving towards Labour's position on a number of fronts. I think Labour's been quite clever in recent months. They plainly lost the debate, lost the austerity debate, and so they've moved the conversation to other areas where they're stronger, and things like energy prices, and now we've got it with cigarette packs. So interesting in the run-up, obviously, to the election in 18 months or so.
Now, before we say goodbye to you, Tom, we've got to get your take on this huge suitcase in the middle of Red Square. It is, of course, a Louis Vuitton suitcase, and it's very symbolic as to where it is. And it is enormous. I don't know if our viewers can see there on the photograph, but there are people standing next to that suitcase, which gives you a sense of how large it is.
It's a quite spectacular piece of marketing, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Is there such a thing as bad publicity? I mean, the fact of the matter is that Louis Vuitton have gained some great publicity from this stunt. I mean, really, as soon as they finished building it, they've started dismantling it. Does that matter? Who knows? I mean, I think it is certainly an embarrassment for Russia. I mean, in the heart of Red Square, to have this sort of ultimate symbol.
And presumably in Russia there is an appetite for luxury goods.
But if you think about how the country has changed, you have Mikhail Gorbachev as one of the ambassadors for this product. So
yeah,
perhaps,
absolutely.
No
how the country has changed.
All right, Tom Stevenson with Fidelity Worldwide Investment. Thank you very much for coming in. That's the Newspaper Review. Back with more news.
See you soon. Bye-bye.